we are at this chasm, this divergence in society that requires us to decide of our own accord what we want to do with our own lives. If COVID was anything, it was the realization for millions of people that it was time to be a man, because now a lot of people have found themselves.
Seeing the tyranny up close and personal has jolted people, and some of the conversations that happen most frequently now are actually religious in nature. If you take it with the right mindset and if you take the right approach to this, you might find it's the greatest experience of your life, which sounds very strange, because how could going through such awful crisis be the greatest experience? Well, it could be great because you find something to live for and it becomes very vital again.
We all have that limitless potential to think, to create whatever we want. Like, all possibilities are on the table. There's momentum behind an idea now, and I think that will only continue to grow. Once you see, you can't unsee.
I think there's the chance for a real renaissance of actual true meaning, and for people to actually realize you were sent here for a reason. You're not meaningless. Life isn't meaningless. We've all got something very, very beautiful and potentially great to contribute. And, that greatness can be as much as you want. It's up to you.
Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. Today is a special episode, being episode number 50. So I wanted to bring on two of my favorite people for this episode. That's Parallel Mike and Seb Lee, both of which you should already know because I've had previous episodes with both of them. Parallel Mike has a popular YouTube channel, Parallel Systems Broadcast, and Seb has his Born Bright website and community, as well as his popular Telegram group and Twitter account, The Corona Cure. I wanted to bring Seb and Mike on to have a much more broad discussion about the current state of the freedom community, as well as the values and principles that we're trying to promote in this new world that we're going into. For me, Mike and Seb are two people I've really looked up to since the world turned upside down in 2020. I think they're always advocating a positive message, and they're always looking at the world through first principles, and also always striving to become more self-sovereign on an individual level and helping other people to do the same. If you like the episode, please give it a like and a share on social media. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, make sure you give it a 5-star rating on whichever podcast platform you're using. If you're new here, welcome. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes. And a couple more things to mention here. I've literally just set up a new Telegram group, which I hope to have a few of you in there, and we can have some discussions around the episodes. And I'll also be sharing out when the episode's released and all the rest of it. So the URL for that Telegram group is t.me/stayingfreepod. Also, I've just set up monthly and annual membership tiers so that listeners can support me on a rolling basis. There's a few different perks for those, starting at just £1 a month. So I really, really hope that you'll check those out at buymeacoffee.com/stayingfreepod. I really love doing this podcast and bringing you guys these conversations, but unfortunately at the moment, I'm not making enough from donations to even fund the cost of running the show. So I really hope that more of you guys will go over there, support the work that I'm doing, and then I can keep bringing you this content. As always, you can also support me with Bitcoin tips, both on-chain and via Lightning Network. Links to those are in the description. And you can listen on the Fountain app so that you can stream sats while you listen. I just want to give a special thanks to Mike as well, who, after doing this conversation, bought me 18 coffees on Buy Me a Coffee, which funded an entire year worth of hosting costs. So thank you so much for that, Mike. It really means a lot, and it's going to go very far. All right, on to the episode. All right, Seb and Mike, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation. It's awesome to get you both on the pod together. The reason I wanted to bring you guys on this is because you are two of the best examples, I think, out there of not only kind of living in a self-sovereign way and kind of really staying true to your values and advocating those values, but also just kind of like the spirit of, I think, how you guys view the freedom movement and where we're going. I think you have a really, really good grasp of it. And, I've obviously spoken to you both before separately, and I thought it'd be awesome to bring you together and we can kind of have a conversation and see where things are up to and just share a few ideas. So welcome to the pod, Seb.
Thanks, Johnny. It's good to be here again. I know I looked earlier on today, and I think it was a good 9 or 10 months ago, maybe, when we last spoke. So I think everything for everyone will have changed. A lot of people have changed ideas and changed the perception of things. So hopefully we've all grown in that time individually.
Yeah. And Mike, I spoke a little more recently to you for the Christmas episode where we did the kind of review of everything that had been going on in the year, but haven't spoke to you since then. So welcome to the pod, Mike.
Cheers, Johnny. No, it's honoured to be back on, and happy 50th anniversary for your podcast. It's I know how much work you're putting into it. Of course, I do my own show as well, and it's a big. These things are things to celebrate because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, but hopefully you're seeing the rewards, and at least you're seeing that growth in yourself. Because I've been watching the show ever since you first invited me on, and your show was actually the first show I ever did go on. So I'm indebted to you because that was literally the first interview I did. You introduced me to some great people, and I've been following your podcast ever since. And I think you've made it's one of my favorites. And I think I genuinely mean it when I say that I think you are one of the best hosts out there. And you shouldn't take any credit for that, Johnny. I think it's just natural because I think it's just natural that you've got this really great hosting style. So you can take from that what you will.
Well, yeah, thanks, mate. That definitely means a lot. Especially coming from you. You've got such a great channel, and you're doing like really awesome work yourself. But yeah, I didn't mention that before. But the reason I wanted to do it for this episode, for episode 50, is just kind of a little bit of a celebration. I thought, I'll just bring together two people for a conversation I think is going to be really cool just for episode 50. So yeah, normally my conversations are one-on-one. Obviously, we've got 3 in this one. So we can have a general conversation. If people, want to jump in, just jump in. I won't try to kind of like guide it and just, say your name or whatever. So just jump in whenever. But I guess just first of all, just keeping it really, really broad. How do you guys think everything has gone since, I guess, let's say maybe in the last year, how are things feeling kind of like more recently for you? Obviously, we kind of first came together, and a lot of this freedom community came together from everything that happened with COVID. We had the whole COVID thing, and then we had the aftermath of that and the whole kind of vaccine, the kind of vaccine coercion and fighting that battle. And then that's kind of, seemingly gone away now. Obviously, we've still got a lot of the after effects from that, and there's a lot of discussion going on about adverse events and all the rest of it. But the freedom movement itself and this kind of community that we've built, what are you guys' thoughts about where it's up to right now?
Yeah, I can jump in with where I think it is and how things have changed. But summarizing, I think it's blown up. I think it's blown up beyond what the other side were expecting. I am now regularly, I go to a judo class every week, and I do a few sessions there. Not me, I'm watching. But I was sitting with a few parents a few weeks ago, and over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks, regularly in conversations, things are coming up about the state of play. This shouldn't have happened. I've even been asked now, did you take the dreaded injection? And I've even now had people admit that they didn't, and those conversations weren't happening 10, 11 months ago, definitely not 2 years ago when we all, I suppose, kind of came into our own with this thing. So yeah, I think it's growing and continues to grow exponentially, and there's momentum behind an idea now. And I think that will only continue to grow. Once you see, you can't unsee.
Yeah, Seb, I absolutely agree with that. I think that there does seem to have been a kind of sea change. I know that maybe some people thought this whole COVID thing was going to just be a very short thing. We had a kind of resistance, we had, a protest movement, but that once that was out of the way, once the initial lockdowns were out of the way, or the vaccines, or whatever the thing related to that was, that, everyone would go back to normal. Everyone would kind of, sink back to where they were before and just kind of continue their lives as they were. But I actually don't think that's happened. I think that so many people recognize that COVID-19 was the straw that broke this camel's back. And people recognize that not only was that a big event in itself, but it kind of represented, for a lot of people, that the world has kind of gone astray. We've lost our sense of values. We've lost our sense of reason. And I think the people who recognize this kind of know that, the next thing will come along. We can't just abandon this fight. We can't just kind of walk away and say, okay, well, that's it. COVID's over. Like, we won, they won, whatever happened, and it's behind us. Like, I think people fundamentally recognize that something has become corrupted about society, and that still needs to be fixed. There's still like a lot of work to be done there, and actually, we have to be the architects of that new world.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think I think, Johnny, if you come across the whole fourth turning idea and the stages of, societal collapse, and there's this idea of these four phases of society, and I've heard it said many times, we seem to be in this fourth phase where corruption and, Sodom and Gomorrah kind of comes to the fore, and there's just this period of uncertainty and collapse. But then as the cycle continues through, as it has done historically, the following phase, or the one that comes next, is the heroic phase, where people step up and they start and become leaders again, become archetypes, become role models. It's almost like we've been so badly suppressed in our education, in our upbringing, that we've lost this sense of self. And I think we just lost, and we letting these demonic entities, or however you want to look at it, drive us to wherever they want to go. And I think that's being recognized, and I think it was always supposed to be recognized. And for me, we are where we're supposed to be right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Mike, do you feel also like this, that there's a sense of, even though this has kind of all happened and we've kind of gone through this really, awful process, I guess, with everything that happened with COVID-19, but off the back of that we're actually kind of creating something where it's almost set us back on track. It's almost kind of realigned us in some way. I often reference my conversation with Joel Rafidi, who I'm hoping to have back on the podcast soon. And he kind of really opened my mind to this idea that, like, we needed this event to shock us. We needed something to shake us, the kind of cold water to splash us on our face. And that event was it to actually help us to say, okay, what are we doing here? We're sleepwalking at the moment. Is that a sense you get as well, Mike?
I think what happened in 2021 was it was the wake-up call for a lot of people. And I think it was the kind of event that you're either going to come out of that with a completely different perception and view of how the world is. It's maybe going to change you, unless you already had figured it out. A lot of people maybe saw things in the past like 9/11, and that maybe jolted them a little bit. But I think for a lot of people, it certainly was the last few years. And it's a difficult one, Johnny, because whilst I'm an eternal optimist for the individual, like, I think you as a human being and as an individual, you've got the infinite capacity to self-actualize, to become somebody who saves themselves. I believe you can save yourself. I believe that is all you have to do. You don't have to worry about, are 1 million people, are 10 million people, are 1 billion people awake to what's going on. I never frame it like that. I always say to people, just worry about yourself, worry about your own soul, worry about not becoming one of those people who was saying, like, lock people up who didn't take the vaccine, or, go back to the 1930s, a concentration camp prison guard, or somebody in revolutionary Russia who was rounding up kulaks and burning them in churches. These are the things that people have done. So just don't be that. Make that commitment to yourself that you're going to be living in truth. You're not going to allow yourself to become this immoral, corrupted, rotten human being, because I think that's what they want people to do. I think they're trying to radicalize people. So I'm an optimist in that sense. But in terms of the kind of overall thing, do I think we're kind of on track as society? I think we've got a really long way to go. I think that's probably the most optimistic way I can put it. We've got a really long way to go, because it seems to me we're missing that critical thought part, where people truly are analyzing. And I was speaking about this just yesterday with someone also. It's this set of core principles seems to be missing, the core morality, core principles that you're willing to fight for and you're willing to die for, that kind of attitude of, no, this is who I am and this is what I believe. I think we've got some going to get there, but we certainly are seeing more people start to make those commitments to themselves and maybe to each other as well, like to creation, to God.
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately think that the way that society looks, it ultimately is just a reflection of the individuals within the society and the moral values they hold, right? I think that COVID-19 and the kind of craziness that ensued from that, and the fact that everyone was willing to just so quickly throw out, first principles, etc. I think that was a kind of reflection of the fact that those first principles were kind of missing on an individual level anyway. Like people didn't really have a full grasp of their own individual ethics, to the point where when this thing came along, they didn't know how to apply those ethics. And then that kind of resulted, on a higher up level, to the point where you had essentially global shutdowns, global vaccine mandates, and these things that otherwise really should be unthinkable on an ethical level if you actually look at individual sovereignty, etc. So it seems like this event, though, has shaken so many people to actually reevaluate their individual principles, that I'm hoping that that's going to kind of ripple out, into the wider world, that, so many people will say, hey, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. Maybe I need to actually think about my morals and my ethics and my principles and what they're about. And hopefully we're starting a kind of, not just a grassroots movement, but also a kind of grassroots reevaluation of what it means to be an ethical person, what it means to be a principled person. I mean, do you get any sense of that, or are you still kind of pessimistic on that front as well, Mike?
No, not at all. I've been very touched emotionally many times by things that I've seen over the past year. People reaching out in private messages, and people donating randomly to the content and saying thank you for speaking out and stuff like this. So all of those things suggest to me that there are big changes happening, and I know that from the conversations I have with individuals. But I do think so far it still is that individual change, and like you said, that individual change is everything. But I also think for that collective consciousness, and I do believe we've got an individual consciousness and then a collective one, and that collective one is what shapes reality. It's the more so it's very simple. It's you've got the good basket and the bad basket, and which one do you put more into? If there's more people living in fear and anxiety and confusion and self-doubt, then that's the collective consciousness of society, and that will mold society. And that's why they put so much time and effort and energy into, everything has to be fear-based, and it has to be all pervasive, constant drilling fear into people. And this is where it's not just about COVID. It's about everything for the past, let's say 60, 70 years, this constant culture of fear. If it's not the Cold War, then it went on to terrorism, 9/11, then it was random terrorist attacks, then it was obviously COVID, and now it's a war, and there'll be something else. And I guess what I'm trying to get through to people is, you need to make that commitment to yourself not to live in fear, but also take responsibility for the collective consciousness, because we do shape that reality. It's shaped by us, not by them. Their agendas and those things that they push through to us, we actually enact them every time, and it's our energy that creates the fertile ground for them to actually exist. And the moment we change that in our own lives, it's like that spreads out, people recognize it. It's like you light someone else's flame. So I'm definitely optimistic about that. But I think for that critical mass to happen, I just think we've got a really long way to go. So, the sooner we all get started, the better, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree. We're still kind of a long way off, but I do like to think that kind of that fire has been started in a way. So you guys are both, kind of got your own respective communities. Seb, you've got Born Bright, and Mike, you've got everything going on with Parallel Systems and the Parallel Systems broadcast. What kind of conversations are going on within the community? So, like forgetting kind of average Joe for a minute and just talking about the people who you're kind of interacting with. What kind of conversations you're having in the community? What are people talking about? What are you noticing within it? What are the values of people? I'm interested to know kind of like what those communities are looking and feeling like right now, which you guys are, both kind of big parts of.
Yeah, I can jump in with how I see things going with my stuff, but distinctly there seems to be two groups of people. There seems to be a group of people that are still in like a shock and awe phase. Like all of this seems new, and it's very frantic, and they don't really know how to process what's going on because it's all new. It's a new trauma. And for those people, they just want to run. It's like a flight. They want to get out. They want to go somewhere. It's like a knee-jerk reaction to go somewhere and share news and wake people up and get the light paper out to as many people and just share the latest piece of bad news, because to have this belief that the more people that see the message, the more people will come to the realization that they've come to. But from what I've seen, that's not how it works. You guys might be able to confirm that in your own interactions with the conversations you're having, but it's almost like the individual, like Mike just said, has to be ready to receive that information. And if they're not ready to receive it, then it's almost like you are going head up against someone's belief system or their faith. And no matter how many facts you present to that person, you're never going to change that person's behavior. Then there's another group, though, who are over all of that fear, and they're really motivated and they're really inspired, and they're doing things in their local communities, like getting groups together. I just had a man email me this week who's been a subscriber of the newsletter and stuff since it started, and he said, you know, Seb, it's taken me 2 years to get to this point, but I finally got enough courage to buy 200 copies of the light paper, and I'm going to go outside and I'm going to distribute them to everyone in my town. And I've just registered with Fifi at a stand in the park, and I've set my own stand in the park up. So whilst it's a long way in terms of time away from where it was 2 years ago, that's the two types of conversations that I'm having: fear and action. And I prefer to be around the action phase, because like Mike said, you know, those people who are ready in action mode, they are the ones who I see as using their nascent and latent power of imagination to create and change. So that's the two kinds of people I'm coming into conversation with.
Yeah, I think for me, Johnny, the community that seems to have built up around my channel, it's a lot of people who are doing similar things to what I did. So it's people who are taking action and deciding to radically change their lives in some ways. So I've got a lot of people who have moved location. I've got people who have moved from, this is in my private Telegram group, which is for people who subscribe to my Patreon. And we've got people who have moved from Australia to Russia, America to Czech Republic, people who have moved to Germany, people who have moved to Scandinavia. And it's similar to what I did, of course. I left the UK and went to Poland. And everyone that's in the group are the people who have gotten themselves to that stage of real radical personal responsibility. And that is saying that this is happening globally, but that's no excuse to not take responsibility for my own destiny. You know, my life, my destiny. We're all going to have threats. We're going to have crises. We're going to have people doing unjust things to us. But so what? I mean, that's what the story of the Bible teaches us. That's what the story of any great heroic tale teaches us, is that these things are going to happen and you can still act. You know, you've still got choices. You've always got a choice. So I'm really blessed that that's the people that are coming to me. And I think that's the message I put out on my channel as well. And I don't really suffer very lightly people who live in that state of, it's all doom and gloom. It's the end of the world. Look at this. Have you seen how terrible it is? You know, I always shut that down. And I did that from the very start of the channel. I have actually, that's the only thing that I've blocked out of my comments, is people who deliver that kind of message. I've just got zero time for it because I'm way past that myself. I don't encourage that on my channel. Anyone that comes to my Telegram group, the first thing that I talk about is radical personal responsibility. It's up to you to fix this. We're not going to whine about it. We're not going to complain about it. We're going to accept it. And then we're going to move on. Unfortunately, that seems to be the crowd that's growing up now. I think part of that, like I said, is just because from the very beginning, that's the only, you know, I'm a very easygoing, placid person, but that is the one thing that it's like, I'm compassionate if you're stuck in that place, but I'm not going to nurture it either. You know, I'm going to say, no, you need to figure that out first. You need to find something to live for. You need to have meaning in your life, and take responsibility for the energy you're putting out, because that's to me so vital, is that if you're magnifying their messages of fear, even if you're in this red pill truth community and you're saying, look at what they've done, here's another video exposing it. It's like, yeah, but that's what they want too. You know, that magnification, they don't care that you're in the truth community. You're actually doing their bidding for them. I mean, that's why I've reached out to Seb. Actually, I hadn't seen your videos, Seb. But through Johnny, I found you. And I was like, Seb's always positive message. And I'm sure you don't always feel positive, Seb, because none of us do. We all go through our periods where you think, God, this is a slog and this is hard. But the fact is, that's not what you're choosing to magnify. And it's a similar philosophy on my channel. It's like, I'm talking about this is happening, but here's what you can do. Here's something that you can do about it. And I always leave people on that hopeful message, have a beautiful week, have a fantastic day, and I'm always there in the live chat if someone wants to pick me up in a chat. And I think that's what you're doing too, Johnny, on your show. So I think for me, that's what I'm trying to nurture now. And yeah, I hope, like I said, it does seem to draw in people that are looking for that too. So I feel very blessed that that's the community that's kind of growing up around it. And yeah, hopefully it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And like I said, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to both of you guys. I think you both embody this as well. You're people who are just talking about solutions and talking about things also like from a positive angle. There's no sitting around and kind of, crying about, oh, but this happened or that happened. It's like, okay, this has happened. Bad things have happened. Governments are doing bad things. Technocrats are doing bad things. They have their plans, but they can do all of that and we can scream about it and shout about it. But what are we ultimately trying to do? And I think this is kind of what separates, I guess, this kind of niche of this community. Even though there's a community at large, I do still see a lot of people who are on Twitter just sharing, just sharing stuff, really negative stuff, and still talking every day about, oh, but there's going to be the 15-minute cities, and oh, there's going to be this and there's going to be that, and that's bad. This stuff is bad, and it's good to talk about it, but not to only talk about it. Like you also have to say, okay, what's the thing that I'm going to do? What's the thing that I'm trying to push? And I think that it comes back to something that you just mentioned there, Mike, which is like, what are we living for? I think this is ultimately what it comes down to is you've got to be living in service of something that is greater than yourself, because they've got the thing that's greater than themselves. All the great reset people, their thing that's greater than themselves is we want to become God, right? They have their vision. I mean, we might hate that vision. We might think that vision is awful and evil and all the rest of it, but they have a vision and they are very aligned. There is no kind of duality in their thinking. They are completely unified behind the goal. We want to play God. We're going to, inject whatever we want into people. We're going to, reduce the world's population if we want. We're going to force everyone to live in 15-minute cities. They have their goals, right? Like it or hate it. In our case, hate it. But, they have their unified goals. And I think that we have to have our goals. We have to have the things that light us up and make us excited to say, okay, this is what we're going to live for. You've got your idea. Now this is what we're going to live for. Like some key principles. And I think I would say that like self-sovereignty and, personal responsibility are two of those like really key pillars that I know you guys talk a lot about, and that's kind of like central to that. But I'm just wondering if you guys can share some more ideas of like, what are the principles that people need to have? Because I think this is at the core of this. I think that beyond everything, people have got to know, what am I living for? What am I actually trying to achieve here? What are my values, and what's the world I want to bring about? That I think is the most powerful thing for us to actually achieve our aims, not just to fight theirs, not just to look at what they're doing and say, okay, I'm going to oppose 15-minute cities. I'm going to not take the next vaccine, but actually to say, what's the world I want to bring about? So, if you guys can just riff on a few of those ideas as well.
Yeah, happy to. And I think though, just before I do that, I just want to jump in here and kind of, because it seems a good opportunity to list the main things that people share at the moment. And you've got like the 15-minute city. And I always say, I mean, there's the post going around at the moment, you could kill that with a paper bag, stick it over the camera. The ANPR machine is not going to read your number plate. You're not going to get a fine through the door. You're not going to get bailiffs knocking on the door. I mean, there's even one guy who's chopped one down with an angle grinder. So to say that the 15-minute city thing, it's almost like for likes. I get it. I see it. I know what they want to do. But what they want, they couldn't even get track and trace to work with £37 billion. So how they can do that with, I can't see it. And then even all like the vaccine stuff, people are over that now. For me, I think people are over that. Like I see everywhere now, billions of doses of the injection getting burnt and thrown out and poured down drains. I just think there are simple ways to cover every single thing that people get fearful about. The immigration, the boat people. I mean, if you go through the numbers, there might be 400,000 of them in total. And I keep saying, the area where I'm from, if you have a group of people who are determined to cause havoc in that area, it won't take long before those people pick on the wrong person and there will be severe retribution, because the people that live here have lived here for forever. So there's a natural resistance, like our bodies have this natural resistance to all of these things that are trying to hurt us and kill us. There's just a natural resistance innate in all of us to all of this stuff. And I think what Mike said is absolutely right. It's about the way they magnify things to make you be afraid. So for me, I try to think what is actually a real threat to my personal being. I can't actually think of anything that is a real threat to me, the living, standing man. When I go outside, what is going to hit me actually? You know, and that's kind of the way I process it, because I just think there's a way around everything. There's loopholes for everything. So that's what I think about all of their stuff. And I would love to list them and then just quickly kind of rebuke them in simple ways. But as for values, as to what we need to do to unify ourselves, one of the things that comes up a lot in the communities, in all the community groups that I've tried to start and been involved with, if there is not a singular shared value that is bigger than the individual, ego or whatever, all this other stuff, then the group tends to peter out. And that's why religion, for all of its flaws, has a unifying force that is able to reach a large variety of people. And I think in the absence of religion, we lack a unifying force on this side of the fence. There is no shared goal. And that's why I think a lot of the groups start and they get a bit of momentum and then they peter out and they kind of they disintegrate, because there's not a single unifying force. Because people are afraid to believe in God. Some people are afraid to believe in the idea of a universal consciousness. There is no singular religion or ideology that unites us. And I think that's a barrier that we all need to overcome. And, you know, we need to just say, right, Johnny, you might not eat the same things that I do, but we have a shared goal in this. Can we put that aside so that we can grow our own food? Can we put that aside to buy things in gold and silver? And I think that's a lesson we're all learning at the moment. But like Mike said, it starts with you. You have to be right in yourself with your own values. And from there, it goes out.
Yeah, Mike, your thoughts on all that as well?
Yeah, no, I echo what Seb said for sure. And one of the things that I think is really important, and one of the reasons why I chose to really focus on the financial aspect, although I do live streams as well, which I kind of think people can just watch the financial stuff if they want, but they can also go watch a live stream if they do want to, which is more about philosophy, ethics, and that seems to get, the same audience sometimes come across, but I also have like kind of a separate audience who I think just like the live streams too. And it's interesting. And, that's something that I think is just so important people start to reflect on. And that word reflection actually is key, to actually reflect on your life, to sit back at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, and take time to say, what have I done this year? What was it for? Did I just coast along this year? Did I develop anywhere? What do I want to improve on? How are my relationships doing with my wife or my husband or my children? And I think reflection has been taken out of society, and we've lost those spaces where we reflect in. We used to, go for a walk in nature. You might, you'd sit down by yourself in the evening, maybe with the candlelight or a fire on. But everything now is so occupied because we've got technology interfering with every space in our life. So I think it's very difficult to find those times to reflect. So this is something that I often try and advise people to do, is just start to reconnect with yourself, because if you're not reconnected with yourself and your true moral principles, what do you stand for? What kind of life do you want? And some people are scared to do that because we're failing in certain areas. We've all got something about us that we're ashamed of, that we're not doing right. And, when we reflect, it stands out like a red siren saying, you need to address this. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to look within inside ourselves and say, what do we need to address, and start to work on that, before we worry about everyone else. And, Jordan Peterson used to talk about cleaning your room. And, I think he was, for a lot of people, he was kind of that message was taken quite well at a certain point. It's kind of gone a bit off. It's gone a bit down some strange routes recently, but yeah, and I guess that's the message I echo. In terms of like the principles, I've actually got the group ethos that I put on my Telegram groups. I'll read them out if you want. There's just 6 of them.
Yeah, please do.
The first one was, I'm making a conscious decision to survive what is coming, no matter how difficult the circumstances become. Number 2 was, I adopt a continual growth mindset and choose to see obstacles and hardships as opportunities for personal growth. Number 3 was, rather than complain about problems, I take action to try and solve them. Number 4 was, I am not looking for somebody to come and save me. I take complete responsibility for my life and the outcomes that I receive. Number 5 was, I reflect on my successes and failures and try to learn from them. Wherever possible, I learn from others also, recognizing I do not have all the answers and other people can help me. And number 6, the final one, was I choose to be my authentic self and to live with integrity, basing my life on moral principles. Irrespective of what the rest of society thinks or does, I stick by my core principles and will fight to uphold them. Now, I think from those things, I think a lot of people realized during COVID that is what they want and that is how they think, but maybe it just crystallized around that one issue. And the great thing is now that kind of schism that's created in our lives, we've all had this catastrophic thing coming. For those people that we're not thinking about what life's about, what the meaning is, is there a purpose here? Is there something worth fighting for? Because if not, Johnny, what is there? There's nihilism. If all it is dead materialism, come here, you only live once, let's go party, let's sleep around, and then we'll die later on. That's not what it's about. And I think we all know that deep down. And I think something like COVID has, and seeing the tyranny up close and personal has jolted people. And some of the conversations that happen most frequently now are actually religious in nature. We're talking about theology and I think for a lot of people it's the first time maybe they've had that. And we all had religion in this kind of set format from being children, which was a very performative thing. You go, you turn up, you leave. And now people are all of a sudden like, wait a minute. Like this is evil that we're facing, and these people are Satanists. There's no two ways about it. They've got very satanic belief systems. So maybe there's something dualism on the other side of that. Maybe good does exist, and maybe we are actually here to fight for good. We're actually not here to just placidly go through life and enjoy it, and maybe there's something deeper. So I think that's really exciting for people, is to realize, wow, there's a whole new part of my life that now I'm exploring. And I think if you've got that kind of little itch and you're feeling it, and maybe you've framed things before just from a morality sense, but maybe you're actually now seeing something else and maybe awakening to the possibility that there is something divine about life, that creation is beautiful and that darkness can infest that and destroy it, and we actually have a duty to live in this kind of light, as they say, like a biblical perspective. But you can frame it how you want. Seb said collective consciousness, and I view it in all of those things. I think Jesus was a teacher. I think Buddha was a teacher. I think they're all giving you different aspects. I think Jesus just gave us a very humanistic element. A humanistic representation of a very divine message. But you can take it to a different place. You can go back to the pagan type belief system, which is about embracing nature. And, Jesus was the Son of God. Well, the pagans worship the sun, the one and the same. The Christ figure is represented by the sun. So maybe you embrace nature. I like to go, I actually see things from a more natural perspective because I work with nature. I grow my own food. I was I used to spend all my time running in nature as an athlete. So that to me is where I feel closest to, if you want to say God, you want to say spirit, whatever. So whatever it is for you, I think if you've got that feeling that maybe there is something more, now's the good time to start exploring those things. Buy yourself some books, just don't be, because I think unfortunately religion really got tarnished because it was taken by basically the mafia, like the Vatican and, all of these organized religions are just like any other artifice of man. They're corrupted, they're like a mafia. And sadly that has turned many people away. And I think intentionally so, because if you don't have anything to live for, then sadly if you don't have something bigger to live for, should I say, you're sadly probably going to get caught up at some point in one of these psyops, and you're not going to be able to fight it back because you're not going to have that strength, to say, actually, no, there's something bigger worth fighting for. So, I don't know if I answered 5 questions in one there, but no, that's just some of the stuff we've been thinking
that's
about.
Great. I am one of those people who goes to your channel and I pick out the live streams first. So I love the financial stuff, but I love the parallel systems live streams because I think you have a lot of knowledge and wisdom to offer. So I definitely recommend that you go to Mike's channel, go and check that out. You're going to get one of the world's best counseling sessions, and it's going to be absolutely free, and you're going to watch it. But hopefully, you also subscribe to the Patreon too. Just jumping on the back of what you said there, Mike. I think that kind of going back to this big event that's kind of shaken everyone. I agree with what you said about the nature of evil. I've never thought about the nature of good or evil in the same way until this happened. I wasn't a religious person, didn't really think too much about religion. I still wouldn't say I'm a particularly religious person, but I'm definitely coming around to a lot of those ideas. And in particular, just the idea that there is this kind of, duality in the world, or these binary forces in the world of good and evil. And I got a distinct sense during everything that was going on with COVID that not only was it kind of, evil in its essence, of this kind of very clear lie that was being told into the world. And I actually think that lies and evil are fundamentally connected in a way that's kind of hard to articulate, but there seems to be something in the nature of, truth and God and evil and lies and, light and dark. And there's kind of a lot of these kind of binaries that seem to, have feeling for me now that didn't in a way before. But during that time, I got the real sense that no matter how many, even if every single one of my, friends and family had kind of, fallen for the whole COVID thing. I mean, they didn't, I had some people in my personal life, most people, completely, believed everything. But even if every single one of them, I just felt a real inherent sense that it was wrong. It was all completely wrong. And it felt evil to me. Even if it didn't feel evil to other people, I was able to kind of tune into this feeling within myself that was like, I saw things like I would look at pictures of, children in masks, I'd look at pictures of toddlers in masks, and I just knew that was evil. Nobody could have told me. The whole world could have said, no, it's perfectly normal. And I would have known inherently it was evil. I just got this, completely like undeniable sense. And I feel like I've carried that through since that time. Now I feel like I seem to have an ability to kind of look at things, and rather than just dismiss them, I'm kind of looking at the inherent like good or evil nature of things. And I'm starting to see that now in the wider world. And I think that for me personally, it's brought me into touch with something that maybe I've neglected. I'm sure it's always there to varying degrees, but it's brought me into touch with something which is just, okay, even if everyone's saying something, even if it's the easy thing to do, even if it feels really hard doing this other thing, if that thing feels right, then you should do it. You should kind of just ignore the noise and just say, I'm going to go with what I feel is right. And I think that this is something that certainly, like, I'm on that path, but I do get the sense that a lot of other people are on that path as well. I was at the Greater Reset, Derek Brose's event recently, and I had kind of conversations of this nature with people, and I just got the sense that so many people had just said, that thing made me ready to opt out, because before I was trying to fit in with the world. Before I was going along, I maybe thought there was something weird going on here or there, or this was a conspiracy, or that was a lie, but you could kind of fit in with it. And then this thing happened, which made you just go, okay, like now I need to just completely walk away from all of it. Like I can't be part of that system. I can't even kind of entertain it. I can't, what's the word? Like I can't be anything to do with that. Basically, I need to move in another direction. And that's something that I've found. So yeah, I think that there is now, I'm looking at other things. Obviously the COVID stuff seemed like incredibly evil to me. A lot of what was happening, when you would see images of kind of people separated from their families, they weren't allowed to say goodbye to their loved ones and things. It was almost just like, if you open the door to this thing, even a bit, even if you just try to kind of go along with it and you kind of acquiesce a little bit, eventually that door will be wide open before you know it. So you have to kind of nip it in the bud at an early stage and say, no, I'm not going to go along with this. And that's the only way to kind of like steer society generally into a better direction. So I guess I've kind of, changed the topic a little bit here, but I'm wondering if you guys have thought a bit more about that idea of good and evil and these kind of binaries in the world, and, whether you are thinking about things that you encounter on a different level now that you've kind of closed the door on the normie world, so to speak, and said nothing to do with it? Seb, I know you did this years ago, and Mike, you were certainly earlier than me as well. I know Seb, it was the financial crisis that really kind of moved you to the other side, really, in terms of like the way that you were thinking about the world. And I'm not sure exactly when that point was for you, Mike, but for me, COVID was it. So I'm wondering how you guys are both thinking about the nature of kind of good and evil, and how to take right action in the world, and where you get that motivation to do the right thing, despite, seemingly so many people doing the opposite, essentially.
Well, in 1841, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist." Because if you are part of society, you're effectively part of a joint stock corporation and you are earning your dividends in bread. But in order to be part of that joint stock corporation, you have to give up that inner voice that makes you be a man. So if COVID was anything, it was the realization for millions of people that it was time to be a man or a woman, if that's you, like an actual woman, not like a woman with balls, an actual woman. But like if yes, so that's, and that whole idea comes from, like what you've just said, Johnny, the realization, your position in this realm, right? Whatever that is, whether you are a Satanist or you are on the opposite side of that whole fence, that's your position in this world. And if you ignore that position, you are not living as your true self as a man, and you're going to get lost. And I think that's what's happened through education and all of these, decades and decades. That's what happened. We've got lost. But that's the great thing about COVID, because now a lot of people have found themselves. And for some people, they've found the way back to, religion and the notion that good and evil exists. For me, I've kind of been a reader of Taoism for a long time. So I've always believed in the idea of the duality. And for me, one thing cannot exist without another. So the more evil they present to the world, the more light, the more good there is. It just can't exist without the other. So I do think about it daily. But I also take that quote to heart, and I'm just a nonconformist. I'm past the point where my thoughts and directions are affected by other people, because you'll only resent yourself.
Yeah, I've definitely got that sense as well. I feel like I've always been kind of nonconformist in many ways of my life, and I know that. Before, I think there used to be a resistance there, with whatever it was. I always seem to kind of, be into something different or have different ideas, and, quite often change my mind about big ideas, and sometimes find, how are people going to find that I've changed my mind on this or that? And, I think that when you become at peace with being a nonconformist, I think that is a huge catalyst for actually achieving things in life, and not just achieving things necessarily, not like talking material here, but I'm talking more kind of on a spiritual sense, on a growth sense, like growing as an individual and kind of understanding more about yourself and the world. I think that kind of being comfortable with being different and, having nonconformist ideas, etc., and just accepting it and saying, I'm not going to ask permission for these ideas. I'm not going to apologize for them, etc. I think that's that is a really big thing that seems to be something that a lot of people have gone through, that personally, who I think are like wise people, people who I look up to. Generally, they've gone through some process like this, where they just say, I'm my own person. I'm a sovereign person. I don't kind of suffer the opinions of others, essentially. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, again, for me, this is probably the most important part of all of it, is that idea, and recognizing that we are living in an absolute perfect creation. This natural system, this world that we inhabit is absolutely beautiful. It's got every single thing that every person could possibly need to survive. And all that's happened is some people have managed to direct us away from that, and to turn our head from it, and basically they just hold this mirror of darkness up and force us to look in that. But if you just take it away and actually look how these natural systems work. The planet isn't dying. They've poisoned it. There's been pollution. There's been Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Things like this have caused catastrophic damage to ecosystems. However, the planet is not going to die because the planet's regenerative. And we are a very special creation, and human beings are the most beautiful creature that has ever been created because we was given this divine spark. You're creating right now. You're creating a podcast. I'm creating. My words are coming out of my mouth and people are listening to this, and it's affecting their thoughts and their intentions. What I say is imprinting things in their mind. That is an extremely powerful thing, and God created with the word. And we're creating with the word right now. And when people are so far taken and removed from their true essence, it starts to feel very strange to have people talk like that and to think about these things. And you may think, well, I'm not religious. And it's like, well, I'm not religious because religion really is this kind of construct of man. It's some rituals and routines. But what I am is very spiritually open, and I'm very aware that the most beautiful things in life can be experienced for free. You don't have to pay for them. And why is that? That's because life is inherently a beautiful thing. Your relationships with other people, you go out in nature, some of the things that you see, like I work on a farm. Well, I don't work. That's the wrong thing to say. I don't work. I live and enjoy living on a farm. It sounds like just a simple story. Recently we had one of our chickens get attacked by a fox. We came back and she was lying in the middle of the road and she'd been attacked. Now these chickens are for meat and for eggs, although right now there was just for eggs because there was young chickens, and she'd been really badly attacked and bitten, and I did a post about this on Twitter. It was actually probably one of my most popular posts ever, so we'll talk about that in a second maybe. But yeah, she'd been attacked, so we took her in the house and we cleaned her up, and we took care of her for about a month. She lived in the bathroom. And unfortunately, during this process, when I reintroduced her to the chickens, she wasn't ready, and they all attacked her, and she had a stroke, so then she was disabled. So then I was like, oh shit, she's been attacked by a fox, and now she's had a damn stroke. And the logical thing to do there on a farm, and what everyone advised we do, is you get rid of that chicken, just kill her now, put her out of her misery. But we didn't, and I couldn't. And the reason why is because this chicken just so happened to be the one chicken that had raised all of our young chicks. She's laid so many eggs. So we nursed her and we looked after her, and did you ever think that you could create a bond with a chicken? Well, it turns out you can. And, you can see beauty in this little thing and struggling to try and, rebuild her life. And now she's, yeah, I know you would. Yeah. And now she started to walk again, and she can stand now, and she genuinely has moved on from what happened to her. She's accepted it. She's healed up. And, just seeing things like that and being a part of that, it's like we don't have those experiences living in a city. We don't embrace our compassion and our empathy. We don't have chance anymore to really actually nurture those things within ourselves and to see it grow. Now, fortunately, when my career was working with people who had been through trauma, I worked with young people who had been abused or been neglected. That was my whole career. So I did get to nurture that. And I think that was one of the reasons why it was very easy for me to say no to COVID, to the lies, and because I'd already reflected on all those things. I'd reflected on the nature of good and evil because I've sat in the room with evil, and I've seen evil. I've felt the energy of evil, people who have done terrible things. And I've seen also some people who have been through some of the most tragic and awful situations actually come out, the strength that they've shown, that young kids who should never have the strength to overcome those situations, I've seen that happen too. So I've seen the light as well. So I've been exposed to that on a very visceral level. And like I said, just living on a farm, you get to see stuff like that every day. You see it with your animals, you've got a responsibility to them. So I think what people are missing in their lives right now is those kind of opportunities to see that either with other humans or with nature itself. And I think when you do see it, that can really open you up to the idea that no, there is a meaning here. Why does it feel good to help someone? Like why did it feel bad for you, Johnny, to see children in masks. Like, what was that? And why you said that nobody had to teach you that? Well, that's something that's within you naturally, then, isn't it? You've got something naturally within you, and I think we've all got it. I just think it's been really dampened down through culture, the type of crap that they feed us on the media, and everything's about horror and gore. I mean, the stuff that we've watched over the past 20 years, by the time you get to the age of 20, you've seen probably 100,000 murders and rapes and attacks in TV. So I guess that feeds into it too. Like, that depresses our kind of shock to those things. We should be shocked by those things. We should be shocked by children in masks. But actually, we've actually had those things given to us for many, many years. And, you know, the culture and, you know, pop music and all these different things, Hollywood. So I think we need to kind of deprogram ourselves a bit from that. We need to get back to these real experiences, maybe do a bit of voluntary work, maybe, you know, go help out on a farm with someone like me. I'd gladly take some help. God, we need it, you know? So, you know, anything like that, just maybe start to do that. And I think you need to replace some of this toxic world. And we've all been kind of conditioned to actually like that stuff. You know, everyone has Netflix, everyone wants to watch these programs. I think you've got to force yourself now. I think you've really got to try and reconnect with that. You know, there's the natural gifts that God gave us, which is our creativity, our empathy, our compassion, and then life gets really beautiful all of a sudden. You know, like, and you've got a purpose. You know, even if your purpose is just to help other people. You know, when I was working in the UK, I didn't have to struggle to get out of bed, knowing that I had a responsibility to people to go help them. You know, some days I didn't want to go to work, but I thought, shit, if I don't go to work today, that person, that kid, or whoever it is, they're banking on me being there this week. And if I'm not there, I know how bad their home life is. If they don't see me that 1 hour that they're expecting me, that'll have a tangible impact on their life. So I could get out of bed for that, you know what I mean? So I think that's what we need to go back to, is having meaning in life and impacting one another. And I guess it starts with yourself as well. You know, start by being nice and compassionate to yourself. And then hopefully, if you get right with yourself, you can start to spread that out to other people. And animals too, Johnny, because I know you love your animals like me.
Yeah. Mike's saving his disabled chicken. I'm calling it. Parallel Mike's going vegan 2023. You heard it here first. So just jumping on the back of that point you were saying there about, you know, the energy and kind of, you know, compassion and not kind of getting sucked into the darkness and stuff. You know, I'm noticing a lot. This is kind of a bit of a side point, but I've noticed a lot that on Twitter, it seems to have gone kind of dark lately. The amount of like stuff that I'm getting pushed in my feed that's just like, you know, man gets attacked in street, man gets murdered in broad daylight. And I'm not even following these accounts. I'm just being given this stuff. And admittedly, sometimes like, you know, the clickbait is too much and I fall for it. But it just seems like at the moment, there's just so much of this kind of darkness kind of being put out there, just ready for people to click onto. But, you know, I know that you guys are both obviously kind of, you know, you've got your farm, Mike, and Seb, you've got, I don't know if we can call it a farm, maybe like a garden, like a growing garden.
It's more like a small homestead. So I've got chickens, we've got fruit trees, we've got lots of space to grow things, but it's not a farm.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, it sounds like you guys are really kind of getting your hands dirty, literally, you know, actually going out there. And this is something that I'm not doing. I wish that I was. I wish that I had like a property that I could actually do that. You know, one day it's definitely something I want to get involved with as well. So I just want to kind of get an idea from you guys just to live kind of vicariously through you both for a minute about like what that process is like, you know, going out there, you know, being able to grow food that's from your own back garden. You know, I know Seb at one point you were building something to collect your own water and things like that. And it just looked to me like this is the kind of stuff that would really fire you up. I feel like that's the kind of stuff that, you know, we should be living for, which is just building stuff yourself to improve your living conditions. You know, so many people, and I think this speaks to a kind of the nature of our consciousness in society, in a sense, is like people, all they do is, you know, they buy their first house and then, you know, maybe like 5 years later, they upgrade to another house and they upgrade to another house. And that's their only experience of kind of making progress in life. It's just, do I have a bigger house? Do I have bigger rooms? Do I have, you know, a faster car? Do I have, you know, whatever the thing is, right? And with what you guys are doing, you're kind of going right back down to basics and saying, I'm going to collect my own water. I'm going to grow my own food. I'm going to go out there and actually get my hands dirty in the soil, and I imagine that just the kind of people that you both are is, even if someone gave you, $1 million right now, you'd probably still be doing those things because they bring you fulfillment, right? So I just want to know a bit about, well, first of all, I guess kind of how you got into that process and your thoughts behind doing it. And then also just how that feels for you both as well, actually kind of, being out there and doing kind of real human stuff, like, digging in the dirt.
Yeah, definitely. Before I go into it, I'll just touch tiny little back on what Mike said about having this reflective mode to look inwards and upon yourself. I think that there's two key themes with all of that. And the first one is space. No one has any space to take the time to do those things which give them that life-changing revelation or epiphany that perhaps this is the direction I need to go in, because we're all so conditioned on this path of success, like what you've just said, Johnny, get the degree, get the car, get the house, get the wife, get the children. We're all conditioned into that from such a young age that before we know it, we're on the treadmill and we've got no space. So, there was a time in my life where I genuinely thought having the space to meditate was a middle class privilege, because if you haven't got the resources to take the space, where do you find the space to reflect and stick your fingers in the soil? So that's the first challenge. If people want like a way, how do you even begin to take the step that you need to take to realize these things? You need to find space, and the best way to find space is to let go of something. So if you let go of something that is taking up a part of your life, you've got to let that go to create space to do something else. So in terms of like an introspective, what can I do about my situation? Look at all the things you're holding on to that are pretty much meaningless, chasing the mortgage, chasing all of this stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Find a space, because we're in this time where that matters. And the second thing, again, what you've both touched on, Johnny and Mike, is the potential to create and imagine change in the world. Before any three of us did the things that we did with our respective projects, they didn't exist. Yet there's Mike now having that power to cast spells, as it were, through the word into people that inspires them. So we all have that limitless potential to think, to create whatever we want. Like, all possibilities are on the table. All possibilities. Do not let anyone think you can't do something. And people that go through trauma or phases and come to that realization, it's easy for those people to say that. But until you actually really put your mind into something and feel that success, you think it's just something that some new age spiritual guru would say while he's sitting down cross-legged with some incense. But it is a real thing. That this is so powerful, and I think that's how we can create the space to do things. So that just finishes that bit off for me. But then into the gardening and stuff. First thing, I had the space, and I thought, I don't want to be part of this monstrous beast anymore. I don't want to go up against the algorithm, and I just started sticking my fingers in the soil and knowing that you can't eat gold, so. All right, well then I'll start growing things. And in the process of doing that, I then got the chickens. There's something ancestral and powerful about just sticking your fingers in the soil. Like, even we think we are wise and enlightened, but I tell you what, my chickens know more about this place than I do. 100%. They know what to do. My dog knows how to live. I am so confused and messed up. And if there's anything, I would love to be able to emulate them. They have it. They are.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. I want to come back to something about that, actually, about the kind of wisdom of animals and how we're kind of different from that. But I'll let Mike, first of all, to just kind of respond to the point about, gardening and getting your hands in the soil.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do what Seb did and go back to what Seb just said about what I just said before that. So, when Seb talked just then about creating, we imagine our life and we invent our life. And that is 100% my 100% belief and philosophy in life. From the moment when I became an elite endurance athlete, I imagined that long before I did it. When I first started running, I was a mediocre runner. And I got a coach who was he was a British champion, and he taught me that if you don't believe you can do something in your mind, he was like, I don't care how many hours you run. He said you can run 10 miles a week, you can run 100 miles a week. But he said, I care about what you're doing in your head. And he really taught me. He was the first person to really teach me to create with my mind. And I don't mean in a very superficial way. I mean on a very deep level, you've got to do a lot of work to try and imagine your future and then convince your real core subconscious self that you can be that person. Like, why can't you be the best at something? Like, why can't you do great? And I don't mean in an egotistical way. I mean, you genuinely have to see yourself as having the capacity to do something extraordinary in life. And again, this is stuff that they don't want you to know. So going back, this is linked to, I guess, to the farm, is when I lost my running through injury, and I was kind of left in a bit of a wasteland. I was like, well, that was my whole future that I'd wrapped up around this one thing. And I was like, well, I can't do that again. I can't just choose one thing and say that's all I'm going to be. Even though I had a career elsewhere and stuff like this. So I thought, well, what would the future look like? And I was like, well, it would be more about, it wouldn't be about having something like a thing. It would be about having a way of life. It would be about something very meaningful. Of course, it had to be close to nature because I loved being in a forest, wilderness. And I basically applied that same mindset that I had as an athlete, the sports psychology, to life. And I imagined first of all, I imagined my wife, and then I met her. So I was like, well, that's great because that one's worked out. I've ticked that box. I found somebody that was a good partner who I could do that with. But then we sat down and we actually wrote down, what does our life look like in 1 year? Then we did 2 years, then we did 5 years, and then we did 10 years. And at this point, we had nothing. We didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I didn't know nothing about finance, nothing about investing. And we imagined everything that I live today was once written down and imagined on paper. Every single thing, from the amount of wealth that I could accumulate from the house, the farm, the way of life, where we live, the relationship we have together, every single part of that was something that we writ down and we would commit to daily. Like every day I'd say, I am this, not I will be this, I am this. And it was really working on that subconscious. So I truly believe we are all architects of our personal futures. And like I said, we can't control everything outside of ourselves. But, my dream was always to live self-sufficient and have a farm. And I made it happen much quicker because I truly put myself there in my mind first. So I would say to anyone, if that sounds like something that's a bit strange, just play with it a little bit. Just play with it a little bit. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? It doesn't cost nothing to spend a few moments each morning to actually meditate on that, to visualize. Visualizing is really important because when you visualize something, your subconscious mind accepts it almost as a genuine memory. If you really try and visualize something, it will get filed pretty much in the same part of the brain as an actual real experience. And when you do something in a visualization over and over again, the way your brain will interpret that is with, oh, we can do that now. We've seen this before. We don't have to fear that. So if you've got something in life you really want to achieve or want to do, that visualization normalizes it in your head. And it then makes it much easier to realize in life. So, it's got a very simplistic explanation, or you could actually have a spiritual explanation. Either way, it works. And that's why the number one athlete in the world will still be somebody who has a sports psychologist and a coach, because to get the best out of yourself, you really do need to work on your mind. So anyway, sorry to just go back to that one, but I just resonated so much because as soon as Seb said all those things, I was like, that is literally how I have created a life that I want for myself. That's literally how I did it, was the same way Seb did. So that's 2 people there with the same message. In terms of living on the farm and stuff, like I said, it was something that I always wanted to do. We went back to voluntary simplicity a long time ago because we moved on to an 8-foot boat. So when Seb said about having space, I was laughing because I was was like, there's nobody who's had less space than we have when we moved onto this tiny little 8-foot boat. Spent 3 years living there. However, what we actually had there was space in the very spiritual sense. We was on the water, and all of a sudden, all of those stresses of having a house and a mortgage and a lot, tons of expenses and bills, and all of that was gone. And we just had a really simple life. We downsized so much. And by the time we got to the point where we moved back to an actual house, when we moved to our farm, we was like, I don't want all this space inside the house. Like, the house was so meaningless. It was just the way we slept. What we wanted was to be outside in nature, growing our food, tending to the animals. And I think that's another thing people could probably maybe start to consider is maybe all that stuff we've got isn't necessary. Like, maybe that's actually holding us back. Maybe that stuff is baggage, having lots of things in a house stored up. Maybe what we actually need is to be freed up a little bit. And, I spend every day outdoors, unless I'm working on the show and the podcast or something, then I'll be outdoors in the garden. Every morning we wake up, the first thing we do is let the animals out, take care of our dogs. And then, right now it's getting ready for the planting season. So we're making new raised beds, cleaning up the garden. And, it's a really physical job. Also, I heat my house on wood. So a good 3 months of the year is really just wood focused. If I'm not chopping it, I'm stacking it and seasoning it, then I'm moving it around. And that's a big job because I don't use any machines. I do it all by hand. So again, I guess this, for men particularly, this is a really great way to reconnect with your actual, your masculine side, which again, modern society absolutely destroys. I've been involved in sports, so I always had an outlet, but I know a lot of men who don't have an outlet, and it really can drain them. Sat at a computer all day. We do have that inner divine masculine, and a woman has a divine feminine, and society's tried to mix those two things up, jumble them up, destroy the masculine, turn women into something where it's shameful to actually embrace femininity or to want to have a child and raise a family. It's almost like a dirty secret of women now. They have a child and actually enjoy it, and they're like, it's like they almost feel like they've betrayed feminism or something. But it's happened to every woman that I've ever met. As soon as they have a child, they're like, oh my God, my career, I don't care about. I just care about this beautiful experience and this family and this child. And I've seen it happen so many times, and that's telling us something as a society. Maybe that is something that we should be doing. Maybe that is actually intrinsic to human beings. It's not an artifice of the patriarchy or whatever the hell they want to call it. So, so for me, being on a farm and living that way, it's like every day I feel, the division of labor between me and my wife is very palpable. And that's something, again, which you really find when you live this way, is that actually there are roles for men and there are roles for women. My wife's not carrying 100 kilograms of wood. No matter which way you spin that coin, it's not happening, whereas I am. And she always says, oh, thanks, darling. Oh, I can't believe you lifted that. And, that builds you up. The same with her. There's so many things that she does, which with my ham hands, I just absolutely destroy. I'm heavy-handed, and I just don't have that touch. So she can do that, and I can admire her. And every day you're both working to contribute to this one system, this one household. And if any of you neglected your role, it would fall apart because there's so many little jobs to do that it just doesn't work with only one person. So you're both contributing, and that makes everything meaningful. And if you then go all the way back from that meaningful life where everything matters, if I don't chop the wood, if we don't store it and heat it, when we're going to freeze to death in minus 30 Polish winters, it's that simple. There's no other way to heat the house. Whereas if you go back to living in the modern world, nothing's meaningful. Nothing you do is meaningful. You turn the light on, you have no connection to nature's economy. You do not know what went into creating that energy. The food you buy, you do not know the sacrifices, the effort, the farmer who spent 5-6 months of the year working with nature, putting time and energy, the finite things, the only things that we do have limited amounts of, time and energy. They're putting that into nature. And every single thing in the modern world is abstracted, so you just do not realize the energetic cost of something, the human cost, and also the ecological cost. That everything's actually that nature has cycles, and not every year is the same. Sometimes crops fail, sometimes they're successful. Sometimes a farmer can spend 3 or 4 months out of the year. Like last year, we grew a load of stuff, and loads of stuff just didn't grow. Like you can't force it because nature's not like that. Whereas in the modern world, where everyone's kind of so abstracted from all of that, nothing's meaningful because they've not contributed to that nature's economy themselves. And that's because, of course, we live in this kind of convenience world. So I think going back to the way that we're living and Seb's working on the garden, it's exactly the same. When you sit down, Seb, and you are eating something and your wife's eating something that you've made yourself, you've grown, well, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than sitting down and thinking, God, this meal here actually started life 3 or 4 months ago. And now we're sat there eating it. So it just adds so much meaning to your life everywhere you go. Every time I light a fire, that's wood that I've chopped. That's effort I've put into it. And it's not for everyone. Not everyone has to live like that. I get it. We all have different lives. But I think what I would say is, no matter how you're living, try and find ways to add more meaning to your day-to-day life. So it's not just an experience you have a few times a year on a holiday. That's not what life's about. Make eating a meal a ritual, even if it's just a meal. You don't have to grow the food, although I would certainly say self-sufficiency, if you want to survive the coming few decades, it's really going to be important to try and build some more resiliency into your life. But just forgetting that for a second, I would say just try and make these little rituals in your life, try and add a bit more meaning. And yeah, I think that makes life much more enriching. It's a better space. And for me, of course, I like doing it this way. And I do think if you want to escape some of these more tyrannical aspects, digital ID, central bank digital currencies, then you're running out of time on this one. You need, even if it's just learning from someone like Seb or myself, like harvesting some water, simple solutions, having some chickens. Don't have to be the whole hog. You don't have to leave the country, but you can add little solutions that could really save the day in a tough time. If there's a food crisis and those supply chains that are about 2 days, 3 days max, if they fail for whatever reason, either a real crisis or an engineered one, they keep talking about cyber pandemic, cyber polygon, 95% chance apparently. If they do that, you don't want to be one of these people that's stuck in panic. So, get yourself a food store, get yourself a water filter, British Berkefeld, Big Berkey water filters, best you can get, don't cost a lot of money. And then you can sleep easier. It just makes life easier, and it does feel good to know that you're doing those things for yourself. It starts to empower you and disempower this beast system that has so much control and we are so dependent on. And, that dependency that they've kind of pushed us towards having, that is now what they're exploiting to make us go along with their tyranny. And if we don't have so much dependency, then you don't have to do so much. You can say, actually, no, I'm not going to disagree, because I don't need you. And also, for financially too, the more you do for yourself, the less you have to pay out in bills. So again, you don't have to work so hard. And if someone threatens your job in the future, then you can say, actually, no, I'm not going to go along with it. I can leave this job because I can survive for another year or so on my living small. So voluntary simplicity, keeping it simple, adding more meaning, all those things come from living this way.
Yeah, really, really great points by both of you guys there. I mean, yeah, I would love to have that experience of, growing my own food and stuff. I really sense that it's something that I would just love to do. And I guess the closest thing I've kind of come to that, when I was in Australia, and I lived in a van at one point for about 2 months, and I kind of thought, I'm having this experience. I'm gonna go full hippie basically here. I didn't even wear shoes. The whole time I just drove down the coast, and I was staying in just the most secluded places I could possibly find. Sometimes I was basically sleeping in my van. I was, going out into the bush, and I was going out onto the beaches and stuff. And I had this one experience where I was, I had kind of like stuff to cook with, just like a pan and a few things like that. And I had food, which, most of it was, well, not necessarily from a supermarket, but, like there was people along the way who they were selling things, out the back of their gardens and stuff. They would just have it. It would just say, leave a donation and take whatever. We've got all the avocados you want. We've got all the this or that. So I had a few fresh vegetables, a few things from the supermarket. And one night I thought, okay, I'm going to really go hard here, with the kind of hippie life. So I went out onto the beach, and I made like a fire that I did from like taking the the hair from coconuts. Like I was pulling the hair off, and I kind of dug myself a hole and put the hair down, and then had that as my kindling, and then built this fire. And then I had like full coconuts on there that were almost like big coals. And then I had my pan on top and was cooking my food. And, it was just an amazing experience, and I was kind of like just sitting there. There was absolutely no one in any direction. I could just see all of the stars in the sky, and I just had the experience. I just thought, this is actually, there's nothing complicated about this. This is actually very, very simple. This is one of the most simple experiences you can have, making a fire and cooking some food for yourself. And it was just sublime. I'd never felt kind of more human than in that moment. I was all alone, wasn't even with anyone, but it was just a really amazing moment. And I think that those are the kind of things that we kind of should live for. And, the problem is kind of in this modern world, is that there's so much kind of technology. And as you said, Mike, there's so many things that are kind of taking us away from our nature. There's so many things that we've become dependent on that's taking us away from that. And I actually hope that we're able to kind of have a archaic revival of sorts. I'm not sure who said that word. I've definitely not come up with that one myself, but someone said this word, archaic revival. And I think that if we can kind of pull into the present moment some of these things that we've kind of taken for granted from the past, little things like, being more in touch with nature and growing your own food, etc., and kind of bring them into the now, and we can manage that in a balanced way with technology. I think that's something that we need to be aware of. And Mike, you were saying as well that there's these kind of, you need to have balance with the masculine and feminine. You need to have balance with different roles. Like balance is a really important thing, and you can almost look at balance in so many different areas. And one of them, I think, is this idea of like, what's the balance between doing stuff that's kind of really innate within the human, that kind of goes right back to the kind of lizard brain, and doing stuff, with technology, and that's kind of like very, very, very modern. And I think that a lot of these technocratic people, the Great Reset folk and the Davos folk, they are purely living in the kind of extreme technology kind of, everything's going to be solved by, putting injections in people and, using technology to kind of bring about the world we want to live in. And I think that, we do need to combat that in one sense. We can't give up on technology. We wouldn't be doing this podcast right now if it wasn't for technology. Like, we need to actually use these tools, of course. But I think that what's important for like people in the freedom movement, and something I think, is happening, I think people are kind of trending more towards these ideas, is just having more balance there and saying, okay, we're going to do the podcast stuff, we're going to watch videos, we're going to share articles, we're going to, blog, whatever it might be, but also to kind of have that connection, whatever it means to you, to nature, have that connection to the outdoors, have that, whether it's growing your own food, however it's kind of expressed, like for some people more than others. And, I definitely need more of that in my life. I know it's something I want more, and I hope to have in like the coming years. But I think finding that balance is like just really, really important. And, I think that it is happening, and it's great to see it happening, because, if we just carry on along the, technology is going to solve everything. And I say this as someone who's a huge advocate for Bitcoin, for example. Like I love Bitcoin, talk about it all day. It's awesome. But, it is a technology, but you can't only have that. Like you have to still have connection to other things in your life. You still have to have connection with your family, and, you have to still do things that kind of are hitting other areas for you. So I think I guess what I'm getting at here is you need to have the grander picture and say, okay, we're fighting this, this kind of battle essentially. And we need to have all the tools at our disposal to fight that. But you also need to, at the same time, kind of stay connected to the ground, stay connected to the earth, stay connected to nature, etc. So, that's my thoughts on that stuff. I guess, we're probably coming up on time, so I don't want to just leave it there. I'll give you guys like maybe one more chance to kind of just air any final thoughts about that before we round things up. So, Seb, do you want to just riff on that anymore?
Yeah, I'll quickly jump in there with that one. I think, the idea of technology finding balance between something that's meaningful and then using this technology for the benefit of good will be something that is different to everyone. And I think it always goes back to that point, what is meaningful to you. So if you can find meaning and purpose in your life without the technology, then that's all, that's good for you. If you're finding some benefit from the technology that gives you meaning, then that's also for you. Like there's no wrong answer. It's what makes you be you in your best expression of yourself. And that's how I would see the whole idea of balance. However, on the flip side of that, I think these obsoletes, these people who dwell in the realms of the singularity, I think that their only goal now, after all of this evil, is to create immortality. So they now see technology as a gateway to immortality, and obviously they want to plug their consciousness into that AI, that grid, and keep us all in this state of control and enslavement beneath them, because the holy grail for these people, now that they've got all the money, they've got all the land, they've got all the slaves, all of the rituals that they've gone through in their life that have given them meaning. We're talking about meaning for every single person. That's what's given them meaning. The last thing now that they need to create, that we are unfortunately swept up in, is this race to consciousness in an artificial form, synthetic life, because once they reach that point, they can be gods forever. So we are at this chasm, this divergence in society that requires us to decide of our own accord what we want to do with our own lives. And the only problem I have with all of the technology stuff, and I'm not a Luddite, I use the technology for all of my stuff, is that the more inputs we get, the more they shape our perception and the more we contribute to the notion of giving them immortality. So that is my only word of caution on that. But it comes back to you and where you find meaning in your life. And that position is different for everyone.
Yeah. Really, really good point, Seb. Mike, did you want to give any final thoughts on just that last thing that we were discussing there? And then, but we'll go around again just to kind of sign things off and do final thoughts, but just on the back of what Seb said there.
Yeah, I guess for me, I am a bit of maybe I am a Luddite, but no, I do use the technology, but I do think that we have now kind of boxed ourselves into a very difficult corner. I mean, people will be aware of well, there's been a lot of people who have spoken about it through history, about how technology will essentially take us eventually to this point of transhumanism, and the place where you'll have these elites who view themselves as superior beings and godlike, gods amongst men, that they will be and then angling to try and create essentially a superhuman which will be them, who will be immortal and will be able to control and rule forever. And then there'll be a subspecies which will be us, and will be essentially these kind of, we'll have a half-life, we'll live for so long, they'll extract our energy or some kind of wealth out of us, we'll be commoditized in some kind of slave type system, and then they'll just get rid of us. And you can genuinely see that actually happening before our very eyes. And, most of history, we were slaves. It's only the last 100 years that we've actually had any form of democracy. People talk about, like, the rich people in colonialism. It's like, no, it wasn't like that. Victorian England, every single working class person was a slave. We had 2-year-olds working in factories coming out with no limbs or dying there. They actually had to make laws at the end of the 1800s to stop 2-year-olds from being allowed to work in factories. That's how bad it was for the working class men and women. This vision of history of having these super rich people. No, that was a tiny select few. Everyone else lived absolute impoverished lives, and we're very, very lucky where we are. But we are really on that brink now, falling right back all the way down that ladder, all the way to the very bottom, and then some. We're going to go even lower than we ever went before, because the technology actually enables them to not just take what you've got, Johnny, but to actually invade every single personal space, and even your body now can be invaded in a very literal sense. Your mind, your DNA. Literally what we would call God's encoding. It's like that is our. That's like that. There's nothing more personal to you than your DNA. There's nothing more personal than that. And yet today, they've managed to get people into this position where we actually see ourselves as some, people do genuinely see human beings as parasites, that we're destroying the planet and, that we destroyed nations and this, that, and the other. It's like, no, it's always been a very select few people that have done these things. And I think there's the chance for a real renaissance of actual true meaning and for people to actually realize. I mean, if you want to see how beautiful human beings can be, just go look at go to Italy and see some of those vistas and artworks or some of the marble sculptures. You'll see what we're capable of. My wife worked as a stained glass conservator. She used to work on the stained glass. I mean, go look at that stained glass. People spent their entire lives doing 15, 16-hour days to become masters of crafts. And we are capable of such beautiful things, the cathedrals that we built, the architecture. So human beings are absolutely beautiful creatures. And we need to rediscover that very, very quickly, because these people will have us believe that we are not only that we're not divine creatures, which is bad enough, but also that we're some kind of parasite, and we're so weak and pathetic, and machines are going to take over us very, very quickly. So you better upgrade yourself. You better become like a machine. No, that'll never happen. This is all bullshit. This AI, it's all a psyop. AI is created by man and it will never be greater than man. I truly don't believe that. And I know some people, that's controversial, but I don't believe that. I think so much of that is actually psyop to make you feel small. And I don't think we are small. I think we can be as great as we want to be. As John F. Kennedy said, man can be as great as he wants to be. I truly believe that. So yeah, I'm like Seb. The technologies, they can have a very detrimental effect, because they take us away from doing things for ourselves, from exploring ourselves, from actually creating those skills within ourselves. We become dependent on it. Same with communication. If you want to communicate and have real deep, meaningful relationships, you better get off the screens. You better look into someone's eyes. You better go out and hold hands and walk in the forest. You need to do these things. It can't always be, technology interfering and having that third person in the room all the time. So, it's hard. We all have it as part of our lives, but you remember that is also what's allowing them to get us to this point of potential slavery. A digital concentration camp, an AI ghetto, programmable money. So yeah, I just think we all need to maybe just clean out the closet a little bit of the technology and find alternative solutions just in case. Use it while it's there, but also remember, if that technology becomes so toxic that it's going to be a part of the slave system, then maybe you're going to need an alternative. So start to implement those things now. And Seb's talked about harvesting water, having chickens, growing your own food. Yeah, I'd go start there with the basics, and then and you might find you use your technology less because you're in the garden, or you're doing something else.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I really appreciate you guys both coming on for this episode. I wanted to kind of do something a bit different for episode 50, and I couldn't have asked for any two better guys to bring on the show. You guys are, just awesome in everything that you're advocating. I love your respective channels and everything, and the content you're putting out there, and just the energy as well, and just the message and stuff. So I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful for you both for coming on here. So yeah, I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of give any final thoughts now, just, anything you want to kind of leave the listeners with. But first of all, just before you do, just make sure that you mention your channels, where people can find you, all the rest of it. Just give people the opportunity to know where you are, and then final thoughts as well. So yeah, go ahead, Seb.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks for having me on. It's a bit of a privilege to be on number 50, 50%. Halfway there to something better, so it feels good to be here at this time. And I hope the next 50 is good for you. That's the first thing I want to say. People can find me at bornbright.com. I've got a new project actually, which will cover how we can actually take action in the world, in local support groups, and that's bornbright.com/torchbearers. That will be brand new. I did get a chance to talk about it today, but have a look at that. It will be live by the time this gets out, I suppose. But apart from that, the one message that I really do want to leave with is, we've talked about where Mike is in his farm and where I am in my farm, and I appreciate that can come across as like a bit of a middle class situation. Like, oh, it's all right for him to say that. He's got some land, he's got some chickens, it's okay. It's easy for him to say that. So I just want to leave with, if you are not there yet, then start things off by creating space. And the way you can do that is cut out all of the shit. So stop paying your TV license if you're in the UK. Pay your energy companies £5. Tell them there's a cost of living crisis. Their obscene profits are affecting your mental health and you just can't cope and it's really affecting your life. You can afford to pay this much money. Get that in writing, get it in an email, make sure you get a read receipt. Deal with the financial things. Do the same thing for the council, same thing for any loans, credit cards, anything you've got outstanding. Get in touch with them all. Tell them there's a massive cost of living crisis. We're on the verge of war. You can't handle it, but I can afford to pay this much per month. That will then create for you, hopefully, enough space in terms of finances that you can perhaps take some control over buying some food or even having a little nest egg, getting you ready to move into a place where you want. So and that's a positive thing we've talked about here. That is something that starts in the mind. It's as simple as phoning them up, making a contact, changing the amount, and believing with heartfelt surety and certainty that you can do this. If you do that, then your life will change. And that's how I'll leave it for me.
Yeah, that was a great message, Seb. And yeah, I'll just start by just saying where I'm at. So you can find me on YouTube. So that's Parallel Systems Broadcast. It'll come up and we talk about finance, investing, but a lot of that's really about protecting yourself from what's going to come. You know, we're seeing all these financial crises. I was talking about the pensions crisis before it happened, the banking crisis, and there's plenty more to come. So, you know, we know what's coming. Just get yourself ready. And if you want to kind of have some advice on that, you can watch the channel. Also, we do a bit about, like I said, about philosophy and just the psychology. You know, this is psychologically tough. You know, you need to be able to have endurance to stick this one out. There's going to be, you know, some ups and downs, but also if you take it with the right mindset and if you take the right approach to this, you might find it's the greatest experience of your life, which sounds very strange because how could going through such awful crisis be the greatest experience? Well, it could be great because you find something to live for and it becomes very vital again. You know, life becomes very vital. Your connections to your family can become very, very deep because you now really need each other. You know, you really appreciate a good relationship when all of this stuff outside's going on. You know, a good friend or somebody that you can trust, you know, and we've lost sight of those things. So like you said, Johnny, there's right at the very start, like it comes full circle now at the end that, you know, people are realizing those things and that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, see it as an opportunity, try and find that, try and be forgiving of other people who are not quite there yet because it's difficult and not everyone's going to figure it out. Some people will never figure it out and, you know, that's just the way it's going to be. You know, it's got to be that way. The other place you can find me is parallelmic.com. So that's my website. That's just literally this week I've just started my website, but I've also got a Patreon where I put a lot of content. So my Patreon's not really for sponsorship as such, although people do go there to just support the channel. But there's also a lot of stuff there about, you know, avoiding gold confiscation. Again, this talking about getting prepared in a very practical way. How can you have backup energy sources, backup heating, things like this. So we talk about that. And I guess final words would be, yeah, just remember that you are the inheritor of God's creation. That's why you were sent here for a reason. You're not meaningless. Life isn't meaningless. We've all got something very, very beautiful and potentially great to contribute. And, you know, that greatness can be as much as you want. It's up to you. You know, you can live your life and just muddle on by, or you can actually go on and change some lives. You know, we've all got that capacity. We are all interdependent as well. We all need each other. You know, no man can exist alone. There's no real true lone wolves out there. Unless you want to go live in a cabin and be that crazy guy who's by themselves in the forest. But, you know, I wouldn't suggest it. I'd say, you know, actually start building communities, you know, build communities for sure. Always, you know, when I first started thinking about getting prepared and stuff, a part of that was, you know, getting away from a society that I saw as just on the cliff edge. However, it's changed a lot in the recent years. I've realized now you need communities. And just as a very quick final thought, you know, I met a guy who actually, when I was looking for my farm and we was looking for a place and I was thinking, right, we want to be as far away from civilization as possible, hide from civilization, live our little life there. And then that all changed when I met a guy who actually fled communism. He was a pilot, and we found him randomly. We was actually on our way to visit a farm to see it, and we was walking around an empty field, and there was this little air hanger. So I said, let's go across. And anyway, we ended up spending 4 hours speaking with this guy. He was in his 70s, and he told us that he fled the communists because he refused to go along with it. He said, at first I was all for it when they invaded Poland. Everyone was. We was cheering them on, and we had to house these soldiers in our house. But he said that then they abused us when we was there, and they treated us really poorly. So I said, screw this, I'm not going along with it. And he said I became a criminal, an outlaw. And he anyway, without getting into it too long, he regaled his story of how he fled to the mountains, Bishadi, and back then these mountains were rough places, and he said I was on the run for about 7 years, and I nearly died about 5 or 6 times. He nearly got killed, shot, all kinds of things happened to him. But he said, listen, in the future, he said, you might think you want to run away, you might think that you want to be by yourselves, but he said, trust me, you're going to need people. That's your biggest asset. He said, don't matter if you've got no money, don't matter if you've got no land, no food, no nothing, so long as you've got other people, and so long as you make those connections, you'll get by. He said, I ran away with nothing, but I always figured it out. But what you can't figure out is if you've got no people, because if there's no one there to help you, if you don't have the mental support, you're going to crack at some point. So if you can't do all the other things that we spoke tonight, if you've got limitations, maybe you're looking at care, maybe you're a carer for someone, and you've got to put all your time into just one other human being, then start to think about community first. Think about where you can find someone. I know Seb interacts with a ton of people online, so do I, and I know that you're available, Johnny. So just reach out. There's people out there, and you don't need to own your own land, but maybe go help out at someone else's allotment. There's always a solution. There's always a solution to the kind of barriers, because we do put these mental barriers in. So really work on those. If you've got something that's like, if throughout this episode, if you have had one of those flashes where you say, but I can't do that because of X, work with that. Actually think about that. Where's that coming from? Maybe that's something that you need to think about yourself. So, hopefully, that's give people, I just hope someone's maybe found something to take away from this. There should be something there to at least maybe just get you started if you are struggling.
Definitely. Thanks guys. Both great final thoughts. So thanks for coming on.
Cheers, Johnny. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Johnny. And as I always say, I'm a big fan of your show. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next 50, because I think I'm waiting for the day where this one just blows up, and I think you're going to be the British Joe Rogan. I'm saying it, Johnny. Like we said, we speak the future and then it happens. Well, I'm giving you that one. You're going to be the next there. You're the British Joe Rogan for me. So we'll see where it goes.
All right, I'll do my best, mate.
It's all possible.